Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, across all platforms to Menji Speaks.
Menji speaks, and then he speaks and speaks and speaks and speaks some more.
So the video I had originally intended on releasing this week is taking a bit longer than I thought it would. So that's still coming out. You should expect it around next week as of the recording of this video. But in the meantime, I thought I would fill the void by doing a review of something that I experienced over the weekend that I thought might be of interest to some of you out there. I recently went and saw Captain Marvel in the theaters. I know, I'm a little late, but life. People, life gets in the way. So not only did I see Captain Marvel, and I want to give my thoughts on that movie real quick, but also the way I saw the movie was kind of unique. It was kind of a different experience to your normal movie-going experience. So I thought I would share that with you guys as well. So first off, Captain Marvel. What are my thoughts? Overall, on the whole, spoiler-free, by the way, so don't worry about any spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. Maybe you're still on the fence, and that's why I'm going to do this video, just in case. Some of you are still on the fence, because we'll kind of get into this kind of the whole kerfuffle about Captain Marvel. First off, non-substantiated, but we'll get to that point. So Captain Marvel was fun. It was a fun movie. It was really well shot. There's a couple points that I'll make that are kind of like, I'm not so sure about this. But on the whole, it was a great movie. It was a really interesting way to do an origin story for Marvel. Up until now, the way they've shot their origin stories have typically been fairly chronological. You know, meet the hero, they're not the hero yet, then something happens and they become the hero and then fight the big bad. You know, pretty standard stuff, no spoilers there. This movie was shot out of sequence, so you do kind of do a lot of back and forth. There's a lot to do with memory and our recollections of our memories, which I thought was an interesting subject to tackle, because that's something that's been coming up a lot lately. In a lot of like science news and stuff is the way people remember things and how people remember things differently, and how our memories can even just be manipulated by our own prejudices and stuff. And so it doesn't really deal that deep into it, but it does kind of deal with the manipulation of people's memories. And so I thought that was interesting. So the movie is kind of shot that way. It's a little jarring, but I think it's meant to be jarring because we as the audience are also supposed to be going along with Carol Danvers as she's kind of piecing together her memories. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that's in the trailers already, and so I think everybody already knows that she's kind of come into this with not remembering who she is. And so we go through her with that, and on the whole, it was a fun movie. Lots of really good action scenes. The acting was great. Again, with Marvel, you got a lot more of the comedy aspect, which I enjoy. So it's a lot more light, a lot more fun. It was great to see some other Marvel characters come back into the fold, especially after, the depressing ending of Infinity War. Like, it was just kind of nice to have something a bit more lighthearted, a little bit more hopeful now, because of course this does tie into Avengers Endgame, which is coming out, and so you do feel a bit more hopeful by the end of this movie, just after the journey that you've taken on it. So it was really fun, great characters, great acting. I really, really enjoyed it. I really recommend you go see it. Don't worry about the kerfuffle. So there was this kerfuffle regarding Captain Marvel. I'm sure a lot of people know about it. I hadn't actually really followed it that much, and that was by design. I really just didn't want to. There's just too much of this kind of stuff going on in the world nowadays, and I don't want to deal with it anymore, because a lot of it always seems to be kind of non-news in the end. A lot of it, we all know, started with the Ghostbusters remake, which a lot of that I feel was a little bit planned. Like, I think they kind of knew that they had a turd on their hands, and they had to find a way to kind of, get people into the theaters. And so sometimes, controversy brings cash, or whatever Eric Bischoff says. Controversy creates cash. So sometimes that's what you got to do. And I feel for this movie, people were trying to start a controversy that maybe wasn't there. I know Brie Larson had said some things in an interview once, and people took it one way or another. And I don't know. It was not totally necessary, and especially for this movie. And here's where I'll make kind of the difference between this and Ghostbusters. So obviously the big deal here is it's kind of a woman empowerment, girl power kind of movie. And so where Ghostbusters was very obviously trying to make it like, it wasn't even so much like I can do anything, you can do better kind of thing anymore. It was more like girls are just better. Not only girls can do this, but they can actually do it better than the way it was before. Even though there was nothing wrong with what was there before. B, it wasn't that anybody wanted to see the Ghostbusters come back because they were men. It was because these were characters that we had grown up with. And, we wanted to, if you're going to make another Ghostbusters movie, we wanted to see where they are now. Obviously, they're getting older. We've lost Harold Ramis, so there's that as well. Like, Egon is a lot of people's my favorite. So it just makes it difficult to make that Ghostbusters movie anyway. So, but if you're going to remake it, tie it in somehow without just like these loose cameos and things like that. It stunk. The movie just stunk from the beginning. And I also I wouldn't have even minded personally if they'd done an all-females Ghostbusters. I just didn't particularly like the people that they chose for this movie. Was also part of my problem. And again, it's not like there hasn't been a female Ghostbusters before. If you've ever watched the cartoon Extreme Ghostbusters, that was probably the most diverse cast of Ghostbusters as of yet. So even more so than this movie that came out. So that was the problem. And then, of course, they just started this whole online kerfuffle, between the cast and crew and everybody else. And so they tried to divide people, and unfortunately it divided their sales. And so that's where they decided to kind of base the success of their movie off of, is just that there's girls in it this time. Isn't that weird? But Captain Marvel, she is originally a female character, so the only way you really could have made this controversial is if you recast it as, if you did a movie about Marvel instead, who, if you know your little bit of comics history, Marvel came before Captain Marvel, and he was a male character. And this is the whole thing. But obviously, at this point in comics, Captain Marvel has typically been a female. There have been a few multiple Captain Marvels. Most of them have been female, and they're kind of the more popular version of it. So I think people would have gotten mad if they went with Marvel instead of Captain Marvel. That would have been really the only issue. And so here, in this movie, I haven't seen Ghostbusters, by the way. I don't ever really plan to. Sorry. It's who makes a really good movie? A really good video talking about why not is James Rolfe. It's in a Massacre. Go watch his video. His views are exactly the same as mine. So I'm not going to get into it here. But so this movie, it does have a little bit of this girl power thing going into it where it's not, and again, I have nothing against that in general. It's fine. Movies like that can exist. And for the most part, I think this movie, it does it well. And I think it doesn't ruin the experience because it's a movie that takes place in the 90s, and quite honestly, a lot of this kind of, a lot of the girl power movement, as you want to call it, more so than like Women's Lib, which seems more older, girl power kind of started in the 90s, I would say. And so we had a lot of these kind of movies coming out where there were more female-led movies. There were some female-led superhero movies that came out in the 90s. They weren't very good, unfortunately, but people did try. And so it kind of made sense in the context of the movie as well, not just as making it a movie, for the girls this time, which is fine. But there are a couple of times in this movie where it is a little too on the nose, and that's what I don't really like. Just as a filmmaker, am I a filmmaker? Yes, I am. That's confidence for you folks. But as somebody who, I do work in media. I am an animator originally by trade, and now I also make movies. So I have an idea of, how film is created, what makes for an interesting story. But when you start putting in ideologies and thoughts like that are just right on the nose, where you're just basically punching the audience in the face with what you want to say, that's when you kind of lose it for me. I almost see that as breaking the fourth wall, quite frankly. Like, it's no longer a movie, and at this point it's kind of turned into a soapbox, which, there's a whole other type of movie for that. This movie does do that at a couple of times, and so it is a little jarring when those scenes happen. But on the whole, it's not really that bad. There's only really 2 scenes in general that I can think of that really kind of hit you on the head with, like, she's a girl and things are tough, but she's actually really strong even though she's a girl. Which, again, I think that's a message that I don't think is necessary anymore. The even though she's a girl message, like, perhaps I'm a little biased. I grew up in a female-dominated family, so there are way more girls in my family than men, so I guess I've never looked at females that way as it is, so maybe I'm skewed, biased in this way as it is, and so I never see that side of it. There's just strong females all over my family, so it's just, so that's always been kind of an odd concept to me anyway, so don't hate me, that's just my view of the world, and quite honestly, maybe some of you think more people should have that view of the world. But aside from that, it was a fun movie. Very interesting. You should definitely go watch it. It ties in very well. There were a lot of talks about like Brie Larson as well. So there was a lot of weird stories that came out up until the time that I saw this movie, even after it was released, where I would see some articles that were like, oh, this movie's bombed so bad and Disney hates Brie Larson and they're already thinking about recasting Captain Marvel. And then other news stories that I'll read where it was like, this is the best movie ever. It's breaking all the box office records. The truth is obviously somewhere in the middle, probably. She did a great job, so I really liked her Captain Marvel. There was nothing wrong with it. She definitely played that role of that character in that situation as it should be. So nothing wrong with it. She can come back for all the Captain Marvel times that she needs to come back. I don't mind. She did a really good job there. And all the characters were really good, and it was neat to see some other recurring characters who were fairly minor in former movies that do come back and they have a slightly bigger role. And so that was neat to see. Whereas before, a lot of these movies, aside from the big, I guess we'll just call them the annuals, the Avengers movies where everybody kind of comes together, they all still kind of seemed a little separated. But now the universe is actually starting to kind of collapse in on itself, for lack of a better phrase. Which is neat. I like to see that kind of world building. And so now you do have characters that were in other movies and they had slightly different roles in those movies and they come into these movies and they have other roles. And they get fleshed out a bit more too, which is good because especially for some of the villain characters, like that's something that Marvel has always kind of taken it on the chin about, is that, their villains are usually not so great. So good movie. So go watch it. That's just my review. Go watch it. It's a good movie. Forget the controversy. Forget any sort of, weird ideologies or whatever you may have. Just enjoy it for what it is. It's a great superhero movie. It's a great story. It's really fun. The mini Menjis came with me. They had a great time. They weren't like, but she's a girl. So there's none of that. Take your kids, take your boys, take your girls. It don't matter. They're going to come out of it thinking, wow, what a great movie that was. All right. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the actual way that I saw this movie. So up until now, I don't really think I've ever done any kind of these specialty theater places, aside from I think I've seen an IMAX movie once or twice. But it's just a giant screen. There's nothing super special about that, really. But I hadn't done any of these other like real D movies or anything like that, like the 3D movies. Like that doesn't interest me. So I went to a Edwards Cinema, which is a cinema that we have down here in Southern California. I don't know how more prevalent they are across the country. They weren't up in Northern California, but and here they had a theater called Screen X. So there may be more of these in other cinemas. I don't know. Probably. It's like Real D, probably see them in other cinemas. So this is a huge megaplex. Like this is the kind of movie theater that I had only seen in like cartoons where they're like now playing 100 movies, the Googleplex, right? The Googleplex theater. It was like that. Like I walked into the lobby and this place was huge. I'd never seen a modern movie theater this big. I've seen some of the classic ones where they were shaped more like opera houses. This thing was just massive. And, for good reason, because it does also have an IMAX theater, at least one. It's got a whole bunch of specialty theaters. It had like a VIP lounge and stuff. It was crazy. So, Screen X. So, not a 3D movie, thank goodness, because I hate 3D movies. Sorry. So when you walk into the theater, there's really nothing special about it. It's more modern theater, so it's kind of that stadium seating where it kind of slopes up at like a higher angle than your more classic theaters, and it also has that little break in the middle so people can kind of walk out the exit without walking over each other. And then the spacing between the seats is a bit more wider too. So like I'm a pretty tall guy, so usually if somebody's got to walk past me to go to the bathroom or something, I pretty much have to stand up to get out of their way. In a normal theater here, there are people walking by, and aside from the annoyance of having them walk in front of me during the movie, I didn't have to move at all. So like lots of leg room, which was great. But aside from that, nothing special when you walk in. It's just a regular theater. The screen seemed a little bit bigger than normal. It wasn't quite IMAX size, but definitely a bigger screen. But everything else was normal. But in the previews play, the commercials before the previews play and all that was normal. When the movie starts now, what they do is the movie's in front of you on the screen as normal. But then what they do is they extend the screen on both sides, and so now you have the movie extended into your peripheral vision. It sounds cool, and it worked. It works okay in the, they give like a little preview. Obviously, if you're in a specialty theater, they'll give like the little preview of the type of experience that you're going to get. Like when you're in a THX theater, you had the little robot. IMAX does like the whole thing where it shows you all the speakers and everything. So this one had like a film that, a little short film that they show you of like it was like a little girl opening a picnic basket in the middle of a street. And then all of a sudden, just like all this movie stuff starts happening around her, like explosions and car chases and things. And it's like just all around you. And it's crazy. It's like being in one of those 360 movie theaters that they have at Disney theme parks. It was kind of like that, except it's like, flat and then flat. So it wasn't round, right? It's just a regular theater room. For the movie itself, here's where it's it's an interesting experience, and I would say go try it, but it's not perfect, but it does work. So I think the filmmakers do need to intend to film for this type of theater, and so if they don't, it isn't going to work. So it doesn't stretch the movie out. It does actually have extensions of what was filmed, but at least for Captain Marvel, they didn't seem to use the ScreenX cameras all the time to film everything. So sometimes the side cameras would be there, and sometimes they wouldn't, and it would just be the movie in front of you. And usually it was like a big action scene, or some kind of chase. Usually things to do with action. Aside from that, the movie was always just playing in front of you. And again, so like it never cuts off the movie, it never stretches it out to make it seem like, really weird. It's always like the intended, what you're supposed to see is in front of you. And they actually kind of force you to watch it that way so that you're not constantly turning your head. So there's never anything really interesting going on the sides, first off. So it's always just kind of extra stuff around you just to kind of put you in the moment. It just kind of makes you feel more immersed into the movie. But there's no pertinent information going on here. Characters aren't talking over here. So there's nothing to see. And they actually, like I said, they force you to not even want to look at that by way of like, they kind of stretch out the images on the sides of the walls and then they blur them a little bit. So it's kind of supposed to mimic your natural peripheral vision where it's not entirely clear, like you're picking up information on what's going on over here, but you don't really see any details, right? They do that, they mimic that by way of how they project it. So the images are distorted and a little bit blurred, but definitely connected to what's going on. And so at first it's jarring because you want to look at everything, right? Especially if it's your first time in this theater. Like you're like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on here? And it's really ugly to look at. So don't ever look directly at the walls. You can just keep watching the movie like you normally do. And just every now and then you'll just be like kind of thrown into the middle of the movie. So you're no longer just watching the movie. You are almost a participant. But again, they don't do it for every scene. And so it is real jarring where you'll have just kind of like, like dialogue scenes in a house or something, and, the movie's just in front of you, and all of a sudden an action scene happens, and all of a sudden these just turn on, and it's, whoa, now you're inside here again. And so you do look to see, eventually you get used to it. At least I did. I got used to it, and eventually I just kept looking forward, and it kind of became natural that these scenes would kind of come and go, and it wouldn't ever be like, oh, they turned them back on again. Eventually, I just kind of got used to them coming and going. I thought it would be really interesting for this movie specifically because I know a lot of it takes place in space, and so I thought it would have been really interesting to see a lot of like space stuff going on over here. There is a little bit, but like not every scene in space had that, which I thought would have made a lot of sense to kind of just immerse you in the vastness of space. But they didn't do that. But for the scenes that they did, it worked, and it was really interesting to see. I would say this type of movie would, this screen would work really well for like a Star Wars movie. Would probably work really cool if people are still down to go watch those. But like movies like that, movies that like are kind of grand in scale, like Lord of the Rings probably would have looked really badass in this kind of a cinema. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's definitely obviously more expensive than a regular theater, but not as expensive as an IMAX. So if you just got a little extra cash to burn for a movie and you kind of want a different experience from the normal movie-going experience, I would definitely suggest go to a Screen X theater if you have one nearby. It's definitely an experience worth having. And like I said, probably for Star Wars, I would go see it again. I have a feeling for Avengers Endgame, though, I'm probably going to go see that in IMAX just because it's the climax. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much. Definitely going to have that. I say definitely a lot, don't I? I will absolutely have that next video coming out next week. It's almost done. I just got a couple more things to film and then it'll be finished. Speaking of which, if you are also new to YouTube and you have not quite gotten a grasp of how it works and how to work the SEOs and the algorithms and stuff, hey, me too. But you know what I started using is TubeBuddy, and this has been a lifesaver. So TubeBuddy will basically walk you through all the steps of uploading a successful video to YouTube. You still got to make the content, but once you upload it, TubeBuddy will automatically kick in and start offering you suggestions for titles, tags, all that kind of stuff, making sure that you've got all your bases covered. You're doing info tags, you're doing end screens. It just kind of walks you through the whole process to make sure that your video is going to get seen by as many people as possible. So if you are interested in creating some YouTube content yourself, definitely go check out this link right here. Or is it right this way? And go check out TubeBuddy for yourself. It's really useful. You can also use it off of your phone. So if you're using YouTube Studio off your phone, you can kind of update your tags and things like that. And just get the metrics working for you, buddy. If you want to support me and the things that I do, you can check out my store at shop.spreadshirt.com/AnnaMenji. There you can pick up some original threads designed by me. And if you want to find me anywhere on the internet, I'm Anna Menji. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all there, always Anna Menji. Also on Twitch. I haven't been streaming as much lately as I was before, but I will be getting back to it, so don't worry. I am liking the Twitch. It is forcing me to start playing other games aside from Overwatch, which is really important. So, until next time, keep on running and jumping. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.